What if the true turning point in Ukraine is not a dramatic battle splashed across headlines, but an invisible shift you cannot plot on any map? Russian forces are advancing steadily, pushing deeper into Dnipropetrovsk and tightening control over several regions. Each day, the front shifts, restless, unpredictable, inching forward like a living force adapting to every move. This is not a static front line frozen in place, but one that breathes and pulses, expanding and contracting based on the interplay of strategy, morale, and logistics. Imagine a chess match where the board itself sometimes changes shape under the player's feet. Beneath this surface, Moscow has launched its so-called shock and awe campaign. This is not just about grabbing land. It is a calculated, unrelenting effort to cripple Ukraine's backbone, its logistics, power grids, and supply lines. With every missile strike, blackout, and severed railway, Russia aims to drain resistance from within, not just win on the battlefield. This is reminiscent of the Allied bombing campaigns in the Second World War, such as the systematic targeting of German railways, bridges, and fuel depots, which sought to erode the Nazi war machine not through frontline combat alone, but by starving it of the resources necessary to function. The consequences are mounting. Ukrainian morale is under siege, and visible cracks are opening in their ability to hold the line. Reports describe dwindling ammunition, exhausted units, and defenses buckling under the weight of relentless pressure. The pattern is all too familiar to military historians. Logistics, not heroics, often decides the fate of armies. In the First World War, the collapse of Russian supply lines led to a breakdown that could not be reversed, even with immense courage at the front. Amid this grinding offensive, a chilling new message is sent. Russia tests the Burevestnik missile. Cloaked in secrecy, this weapon signals a leap in technology and a warning that the rules of deterrence and conflict are being rewritten as we watch. With each technological advance, the calculus of warfare changes. Think back to the first use of tanks in the Battle of the Somme, or the introduction of the atomic bomb in 1945, moments when the rules shifted overnight. Ignore these shifts, and you risk missing how the fate of Eastern Europe is quietly being decided. This is not just about Ukraine. It is the opening act of a new era in warfare, where the balance of power is being redrawn in real time. Just as the fall of Constantinople in 1453 reshaped the balance of power in Europe and Asia, the outcome here could send shockwaves well beyond the region. Let's break down exactly how these forces interact, and why the consequences could reach far beyond today's front lines. First, we need to look closely at the ground campaign itself, and what these incremental advances really mean for both sides. The shape of the front is only part of the story. The tempo, the sequencing of attacks, and the targeting of infrastructure all play roles that transcend simple geography. From grinding stalemates to sudden high-intensity assaults, Ukraine's war has become a proving ground for a new era of conflict, where the rules are being rewritten on the fly. Every day brings fresh improvisations, new tactics, unexpected feints, and an unending contest to adapt faster than the enemy. In recent weeks, Russian forces identified as the Vostok Group in the southeast and the Sever Group in the northeast have made significant incursions into Ukrainian territory. Their momentum is most apparent near Pokrovsk, Kherson, and Kharkiv, regions whose control could reshape the entire logistical landscape of the war. These are not nameless, faceless places. They are crossroads, arteries, and gateways that determine which side can move men, machines, and material. Pokrovsk, more than just a point on the map, now pulses as the main artery of Ukraine's defense in the east. Here, highways, railways, and support lines intersect, forming the backbone that keeps Ukrainian troops supplied and fighting. Russian commanders know this well. Their pressure on Pokrovsk grows daily, each maneuver aimed at throttling these critical lifelines. In military history, control of such logistical nodes has often been pivotal. During the American Civil War, the capture of Atlanta by Union forces in 1864 split Confederate supply lines and hastened the Southern collapse. But the campaign is not simply about territory gained or lost. Russian units are methodically targeting the infrastructure that sustains Ukrainian resistance. Bridges collapse under missile fire, warehouses erupt in flames, rail yards are cratered, and convoys are ambushed. Each attack is crafted to do more than inflict damage. It is designed to unravel the very system that allows Ukraine to fight back. This systematic approach mirrors the German blitzkrieg, where targeting enemy communications and logistics was as important as direct confrontation. On the ground, the struggle is relentless. Urban combat tears through the streets, block by block, building by building. Drones swarm above, directing barrages with chilling accuracy and launching their own precise strikes. At night, the horizon flickers with the glow of rocket launches and the thunder of explosions, making every city block a potential front line. In some neighborhoods, families shelter in basements as the world above them is transformed into a battleground, a scenario reminiscent of the sieges of Aleppo or Grozny, where urban warfare blurred the lines between civilian and military targets. Despite the onslaught, Ukrainian defenders have mounted repeated counterstrikes. Yet with each passing day, these efforts grow more costly. Ammunition dwindles, fuel runs short, and reinforcements are stretched thin. Reports from the front paint a picture of mounting casualties and exhaustion as Ukraine's resources are ground down by the sustained Russian advance. This echoes the fate of surrounded armies throughout history, from the defenders of Leningrad to the French at Dien Bien Phu, where shortages and attrition ultimately proved decisive. Understanding the pattern behind these moves is essential. The Russian campaign is not a collection of random attacks. It is a deliberate, systematic push to expose and exploit every Ukrainian weakness. Without seeing this broader strategy, it is easy to mistake the chaos for chance, when in fact every strike is intended to force a breakthrough and tilt the war's outcome. The lesson here is clear. In modern conflict, battlefield victories are built on invisible foundations of planning, intelligence, and logistics. These calculated Russian advances are only one part of a larger shift. In parallel, a new phase is unfolding, one that will redefine what modern warfare looks like, both on the battlefield and beyond. The combination of kinetic force and technological innovation is forging a new template for 21st century conflict. Why are power plants and railways now as vital as trenches and tanks? Because the Russian campaign, codenamed Shock and Awe, is not simply rewriting the rules of engagement. It is attacking Ukraine's ability to function, endure, and resist on every possible front. This is not merely about breaking through defensive lines with brute force. It is about systematically targeting the arteries of a nation, the places where energy is generated, supplies are moved, and cities remain alive after dark. The precedent for such a campaign can be seen in the Gulf War of 1991, when coalition forces systematically demolished Iraqi infrastructure, leaving the country paralyzed and unable to resist effectively. In recent weeks, relentless waves of strikes have swept across Ukraine. Russian missiles and drones are not just seeking military targets. They are zeroing in on energy hubs, industrial complexes, railway junctions, and supply depots. Each attack is meticulously planned. The aim is not only destruction, but disruption. When a power station goes silent, or a critical rail yard is obliterated, the shock reverberates far beyond the blast zone. Suddenly, the front line is everywhere that fuel is needed, everywhere ammunition must flow, everywhere a city relies on electric light to make it through the night. The effect is cumulative. Each new loss compounds the difficulties faced by the defenders. Ukrainian air defenses, including highly advanced Patriot and NASAMS batteries, have been stretched to the breaking point. Every night brings a new barrage. While many missiles are intercepted, there are only so many launchers, only so many precious interceptor missiles. Reports from the ground warn that stocks of these high-tech interceptors are dwindling to dangerously low levels. Each assault leaves Kyiv and other cities in a near-permanent state of alert, with sirens piercing the night and the skyline flickering from explosions as infrastructure is battered, especially across the vulnerable left bank. This scenario is reminiscent of the London Blitz, where nightly raids forced civilians and defenders to live on constant edge, never knowing where the next bomb would fall. The consequences are immediate, and they are punishing. When a key rail yard is destroyed, it can cut entire brigades off from resupply. If a fuel depot or logistics hub falls, defensive lines can unravel like a chain of dominoes. Suddenly, reserves cannot be moved where they are needed most. This is not a mere inconvenience. It is an existential threat. With every lost node, the pressure on exhausted defenders grows, and the cracks in the system grow wider, threatening to split open. The domino effect is not just theoretical. It was seen in the collapse of the French defense during the Second World War, when German panzers bypassed the Maginot Line, targeting supply and communication lines instead. Equally striking is how Russian advances have shifted in character. The era of massed, high-casualty frontal assaults is fading. Instead, Russian progress has become methodical, step by step, each move coordinated with infrastructure strikes designed to weaken resistance long before ground forces approach. The battlefield itself is being reshaped, softened, and prepared by engineers, targeting specialists, and electronic warfare teams. This is warfare as a complex, multi-layered operation, fought as much by those behind the scenes as by those holding rifles in the mud. The lessons of the Yom Kippur War, where electronic warfare and surprise shaped the outcome, are being applied on a larger, more technologically advanced scale. Yet the gravest risk is not only military. As Ukraine's infrastructure buckles under unending attack, the resilience of civilians is put to the test. Blackouts, shortages, and shattered supply lines threaten daily life across entire regions. Each new strike does not just batter steel and concrete. It chips away at the morale of soldiers and civilians alike, eroding the faith that the country can hold together under such relentless pressure. History is filled with examples where civilian morale became the decisive factor, from the siege of Sarajevo to the bombed cities of Vietnam. When the will to endure falters, even the strongest armies can find themselves adrift. Beneath this escalating operational tempo, a subtler but more profound transformation is underway. The strain is not just on physical assets, but on the psychological and organizational fabric binding Ukraine's defense. How long can a nation endure this scale of systematic disruption? What happens when the invisible lines, those of trust, coordination, and resolve, begin to snap? The answers are not theoretical. In the late stages of the Vietnam War, the breakdown of command and morale among South Vietnamese forces led to a rapid collapse, despite years of resistance. But the tempo is still accelerating. As new Russian weapon systems enter the battlefield, the stakes and the risks for Ukraine, and for the world, are only growing. The introduction of advanced drones, hypersonic missiles, and cyber warfare tools has the potential to tilt the balance even further, creating situations that no previous generation of commanders has had to face. What happens when an army's morale, supplies, and command all falter at the same moment? This is the harsh reality now confronting Ukrainian forces as their defenses begin to fracture. Encircled in several key sectors, Ukrainian units teeter on the brink. Ammunition, fuel, and even basic rations have dwindled to dangerous lows. Crucial strongholds like Pokrovsk are barely holding on, threatened with collapse at any hour. This mirrors the fate of surrounded armies from Stalingrad to Singapore, where the loss of logistics spelled disaster. Behind the front lines, the crisis deepens. Reports swirl of almost 300,000 desertions, a mass exodus that signals not just exhaustion, but a breakdown in discipline and belief. Whole units, battered by relentless assaults and cut off from resupply, are abandoning their posts, leaving wide gaps in the defensive line. In the First World War, similar waves of desertion presaged the Russian Revolution, as soldiers lost faith in their leaders and the cause itself. In underground command centers, panic and urgency are palpable. Some commanders plead to retreat and save what is left, but political leaders in Kiev demand that every inch be held, regardless of the cost. This inflexible order is turning vital defense hubs into isolated outposts, surrounded and starved of support. A parallel can be drawn to the final days of the Berlin defense in 1945, when orders to hold at all costs transformed the city into a graveyard for its defenders. Pokrovsk has become the linchpin. Should it and neighboring logistical hubs fall, southeastern Ukraine's defenses could unravel in days. The loss would trigger a domino effect, collapsing supply routes and opening the way for Russian forces to surge deep into territory once considered secure. The fall of Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge, for instance, would have opened the entire Allied rear to German exploitation. Only a desperate defense prevented catastrophe. On the ground, Russian troops push forward against scattered, disorganized resistance. Ukrainian forces have splintered into small, desperate pockets, no longer a unified army, but survivors fighting in isolation. The discipline and cohesion that once defined the defense have given way to confusion and raw instinct. This is the transformation from order to chaos that has been described in accounts of the fall of Saigon, or the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, where units simply melted away. The stakes are stark. A collapse now could mean the rapid loss of vast regions, unleash a humanitarian catastrophe, and permanently shift the balance of power across Eastern Europe. For every decision-maker and soldier, the risks have never been higher. The suffering of civilians, the displacement of millions, and the transformation of borders could redraw the map of Europe, as happened after the Balkan Wars of the 1990s. Yet this is not the whole story. There is a new front emerging far from the trenches, a technological dimension that threatens to reshape the very nature of the war. This front is both visible through the deployment of new weapons and invisible as cyber attacks, electronic jamming, and psychological operations intensify. As the physical lines crumble and chaos spreads, a quiet but profound battle over technology is beginning to decide the future. This new front may ultimately determine which side shapes the region's fate. The introduction of game-changing technology has always marked turning points in warfare, from the longbow at Agincourt to the stealth bomber over Baghdad. What happens when a single missile test shakes the foundation of global power? Russia's recent launch of the Burevestnik nuclear-powered cruise missile is no ordinary milestone in the arms competition. Theoretically, this missile can remain airborne for several days, reaching ranges that were once considered out of reach by any military planner. Overnight, ideas like safe rear zones or predictable threat corridors seem dangerously outdated. The psychological effect alone, knowing that a weapon can strike from anywhere, at any time, alters the risk calculations of every military planner. The response in Western capitals is more than unease. It verges on panic. For years, Western analysts dismissed these Russian capabilities as exaggerated boasts or pure science fiction. But with every successful test, the illusion falls away. Russia is not only flaunting strength, it is shifting the bedrock assumptions of strategic deterrence. This is reminiscent of the shock triggered by the Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957, which upended Western confidence in technological supremacy and sparked the space race. This technological leap does not happen in isolation. It is arriving alongside real progress on the ground, methodical gains on several fronts, continuous strikes against vital infrastructure, and a relentless psychological campaign. Together, these moves do not merely pressure Ukrainian troops. They rattle the entire Western system of military planning. The message is unmistakable. Modern war is about paralyzing a society's nerves, its logistics, morale, and its faith in technological advantage. In the early days of the Cold War, similar shifts forced a complete rethink of NATO defense doctrine. Ukraine's struggle now reveals a sobering truth. Even the bravest defense can fracture when hit from multiple angles, not just in the trenches, but through attacks on power grids, transport arteries, and communications. When missile launches and ground assaults are carefully synchronized, defending by old doctrines quickly becomes futile. The Maginot Line, once the pride of French defense, was bypassed in 1940 by a combination of speed, surprise, and targeted strikes, not brute force alone. The Burevestnik test is more than a technical feat. It is a warning. Policymakers, analysts, and citizens alike must recognize the signals, or risk facing a future where sudden technological leaps redefine not only victory, but survival itself. The era of slow, predictable wars may be finished. Surprise and disruptive innovation now occupy center stage. As in the Napoleonic era, when the levy en masse redefined what was possible in war, new tools are changing the rules even as the game is played. With the old rules collapsing, the real question is, what must strategists, observers, and ordinary people do to adapt and survive? First, it is crucial to develop a new mindset, a willingness to question assumptions and constantly scan for emerging threats. This means investing in intelligence, both human and technological, to detect shifts before they become irreversible. Second, resilience must be built into every level of society. Redundancy in power grids, decentralized logistics, and community-based support networks. The experience of Londoners during the Blitz, where local committees organize civil defense and supply distribution, offers a model for civilian resilience under fire. Third, military planners must embrace adaptability. This includes training for scenarios that break the mold, from cyber attacks on command networks to the sudden loss of communications. War games and simulation exercises should include not only conventional threats, but also asymmetric and technological surprises. The Israeli Defense Forces, after setbacks in the Yom Kippur War, overhauled their doctrine to anticipate the unexpected. Fourth, international cooperation must deepen. No nation can withstand a systematic campaign of disruption alone. Sharing intelligence, coordinating air defenses, and standardizing logistics across alliances can blunt the edge of a campaign like shock and awe. The Berlin airlift is a testament to what can be achieved when nations pool resources and expertise in the face of existential threats. Finally, ordinary citizens must stay informed, skeptical, and engaged. The psychological dimension of modern warfare targets not just armies, but societies. Disinformation campaigns, panic-triggering rumors, and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure are designed to sow confusion and sap the will to resist. Civic education, digital literacy, and community solidarity are as vital as any weapon system. As the battlefield transforms, those watching from afar must decide how to respond. The next phase will test not just armies, but the very resilience of societies. In every home, every office, and every government chamber, the challenge is the same: to recognize the new rules before they are written in the language of defeat. In a world where front lines dissolve overnight and missiles erase distance, are you still searching for answers in yesterday's headlines? What is unfolding in Ukraine is not a war you can track by maps alone. Each push forward, every blackout, every new weapons debut, these are tremors reshaping how conflicts are fought and won. Armies now move beneath the constant gaze of drones. Supply lines are marked for destruction, and the psychological war grinds as relentlessly as the physical. The fog of war grows denser, and old signposts no longer point the way. Power today is measured not just by boots or borders, but by who controls the narrative, who can break the enemy's rhythm, and who can sap the will to fight. The divide between battlefield and home front is fading as infrastructure crumbles and civilians face daily uncertainty. In the 21st century, wars are won not only by capturing territory, but by dominating the information space and shaping perceptions. But amid these shifts, the greatest danger is refusing to see the new reality. If you view this war through the lens of the 20th century, you risk not only misunderstanding, but falling into irrelevance, or worse, strategic blindness. The consequences go far beyond theory. They mean being caught unprepared as power is redefined before our eyes. Just as Europe's rulers failed to grasp the implications of the machine gun before 1914, today's leaders must not ignore the lessons unfolding in real time. So ask yourself, as the logic of war is rewritten in real time, will you see it? Or will you be left piecing together fragments, always behind, as new rules and new borders take shape? The choice is not abstract. It is happening now, and the world is watching. Will you recognize the invisible fault lines before they become chasms? Before the next missile, the next blackout, the next leap in technology makes the old world unrecognizable? The answer depends not just on armies or leaders, but on all of us, on our ability to adapt, to think critically, and to act with purpose as history pivots before our eyes.